right. Core story, root cause, limited mindsets. What does this have to do with relationships or great relationships? Hello, friend. I am Janet Broadbent, and I've got my good friend Marinna here. And we are going to talk today about what a core story is and how that has anything to do with a great relationship. Marinna.
Hi, Janet. I'm so happy to be here with you again. Uh,
Wait.
so, where do you want to start with this? This is a really big, deep topic we're going to be covering. And you mentioned you wanted to do this in 3 videos instead of
Yes.
one. Is there anything you want to
Yes.
say about that before we get started?
Yeah, so this will be the first video of 3 that'll explain and describe what the core story is and how that can bring a deeper, rewarding friendship or relationships that are deeper. And then we want to do one that actually takes somebody through a process to find their core story. And then we want to do a liberation video that actually is kind of walking back through out of that core story. If I'm describing it right, this is how I see it.
They may
So
not understand yet, but they will.
yeah, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And I just wanted to add real quick, Marinna, before we get started, that in my coaching with other people, I realized really quick that every problem with mental health and with relationships, it all had to do with that story inside.
Mhm.
And of course, our relationships around us have to do with how our relationship is inside of us, what our relationship is with ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That is the core foundational relationship of every other relationship. Every other relationship is just a reflection of the one that's with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I love that we are going to really dive into this core story that we find and then go from there.
Yay. Okay. Let's get started. Let's get started. My brain's going to, there's probably a lot of people wondering, well, what is a story? Right? What is a story? What does she mean when she's talking about story? And I actually too had this question when I was studying it. I went to my guides and I'm like, okay, what is a story? Give me a definition, a really good definition of a story, what it is. And what I was told was that a story is anything that you or I tell myself that may or may not be true. Right? And so that's pretty much almost everything. Almost everything with the exception of like emotions, with the exception of like I don't know, life beingness, right? That's probably not story, but there's very few
Yeah.
things that isn't a story, and they may or may not be true. But what I found over time is that when we buy into them and believe them as this is the way it is, then we're in the persona. Remember, like this isn't
Right.
only seeing 2 options available; we're seeing one, one
Right.
option. We are in a massive persona
It's
because
almost like a
what might be
very
true for
limiting.
me might not be true for somebody else, right?
Yeah.
Or what
Yeah.
works for you might not work for somebody else. Anyway, so a lot of it's story. Another way to look at it is your limiting mindsets, your limiting belief systems, right? Yeah, so we're primarily going to be focusing on limiting belief systems, and I call those your stories.
Okay, that makes it easy. Any thought or story you have in your brain that limits you.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
that's and people will be surprised when they start looking at their mindsets and stories that most of our stories, even if you think it's a positive one, can limit you,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, I don't know if I want to go into that. That might be an advanced video.
I could I could ask you if it kind of relates to this. So I have seen people around my table of coaching say things similar to this. I just am the way I am because my mom was this way. Or, you know, I do these things because that's the way I was raised or whatever.
Mhm.
And to me, would that be in the same line as limiting belief? It's your
Yes,
belief about why you do it or what you're doing.
Yes, those are some very deeply ingrained limiting beliefs that stop people from actually living the life that they want. Another one is it's in my genes,
Yeah.
or it's a mental issue, right? Or a mental
Right.
illness. And so there's a lot of times these things that we make up can actually limit us. Is it in your brain? Possibly. But when we say, I have a mental illness, therefore I cannot solve my anxiety, right? Or
Mm.
I can't ever cure my addictions. These are very limiting beliefs as far as I'm concerned.
And so when you're working on a relationship and you find yourself getting triggered here and there with different things, um, would the triggers be from the core story, possibly?
Yes, 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 yes. So here's how it works. And I want to go into this a little bit for a minute here. Okay. So I would say the queen of helping people discover their stories is probably Byron Katie.
Yeah.
And for anybody who hasn't discovered Byron Katie, go read her books. Like, don't just do the work that Janet and I are telling you to do. Go read her books, because what she can do and what she's done for years now is help people be able to recognize when they're dealing with a story and how that is so limiting, right? And what I'm calling hers are more, I mean, she has some deeper stories. I'm not saying all of hers are surface stories, but what I discovered over time when I was studying her work was that all of these stories that I was believing were actually leading me to one core belief about myself. And I kind of discounted it at the time. This was maybe 13 years ago, right? Like, I kind of discounted it because Byron Katie didn't say it, right? But I was inspired. I can see that now. I was very much inspired that all of these beliefs that we're believing boil down to one major core one. And this one was created, or we started believing it when we were very, very young. Okay. Most of the time, what I notice is right around the age 3 for people, right? Sometimes a little older, sometimes probably a little younger, but right around the age of 3 is when I notice that most people adopt this belief system. And that belief system, therefore, starts creating more surface beliefs about themselves. And our identity starts being birthed at that point. And the challenge is that this identity that we create for ourselves is based from a lie. It's not even true, this belief that we make up about ourselves. It's not even true. And so because this is coming from a core lie, I could synonymously use the words core story or your core lie, right? Because it is that dysfunctional. Right? And so we adopt this, and we start believing it. And then as a result of that story, we start making up other stories, and then other stories, and then other stories, until we are riddled with all of these belief systems about who we are. And probably 99% of them aren't even true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So then we get into relationship with somebody else who also has all these things built up, all these limiting beliefs about themselves, right? And then we try to have an authentic relationship. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm amazed that people still keep having relationships that you know what I mean? That somewhat work with all of this stuff we've got going on.
It's like driving a vehicle with 3 wheels instead of 4, right?
Yes. Yes, 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 yes. So
It
one
feels
of the things that
wrong.
I want to say is that when we, well, maybe we should go into the how this is created. Do you want to talk about how the story is created, how we do this?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good place to start. Yeah.
So here's the way that I've been shown it, okay, is that we're born, right? We're these great, big, beautiful beings coming from a realm of oneness. And
And
we're born into this,
spiritual.
yeah, this great,
Yeah.
big spiritual connection with, you know, all the
Everything.
powers that be and everything, right?
Yeah.
And then we're born into this reality that is, I almost said bipolar. That's actually probably more truth to that than we know. It's a duality. We're born
Yeah.
into this planet of duality, right? Or this real
Right.
reality of duality. And so we come in immediately into a place that doesn't have that oneness or the perceived lack of oneness, right? And so automatically in our psyche, something starts getting developed. And usually that is something around something's wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like, something's wrong. What happened? Right?
Because you would
Nothing's, it's not
automatically,
oneness anymore. Huh?
yeah, you could automatically think something is wrong when you come from just, everything through the womb to a cold, maybe hospital room or whatever. You could automatically be thinking that as you're coming into this world, there is
Yeah.
something wrong.
So the challenge is that our well, I don't know if this is a challenge, but what happens is our cognitive brains haven't developed by this point, right? And so what ends up happening is those are imprints on us, right? So everything that happens is imprinting on our developing brain and our bodies, right? And so we come out and maybe it's a cold hospital room that's really bright and we get poked and prodded and all kinds of stuff put inside of us and what have you, right?
Right.
And so our first experience of life can be kind of intense, right? And we go, what's wrong?
Yeah.
But even an experience where mom and dad love us and cuddle us and hold us, that's gonna imprint on our mind too, that life can be warm and soft and snuggly too at times. But then we're gonna inevitably have times where mom and dad aren't there, or mom and dad are being human, right?
Right.
And they're gonna
Right.
do what moms and dads do because we all do, right?
Right.
And you're gonna make up some stories. That's gonna be imprinted on you before your cognitive brain can even make sense of it. It's going to be imprinted on you. And over time, those imprints are going to build up and build up and build up. And then right around age 3, we start getting cognitive enough to start realizing there really is something wrong, right? And then as we continue to get older, because children tend to internalize everything and make it about them,
Yeah.
they start taking everything personally.
Yeah. What
So,
is wrong with me to
yep,
make that happen?
what is wrong with me in order for that thing to happen?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is the beginning of this core story.
Okay. So it's almost like we start at that point writing our story, so to speak,
Yep.
and our imaginations are really good as a little child, because to think that you are responsible for this big thing that happened is quite the imagination,
Yeah.
right? But
Mhm.
it's not always a positive core story or a positive chapter that we're
I have
writing.
never found one person that has created the positive of this.
Wow.
Not ever once. And I kind of suspect this is part of the earth experience.
Yeah.
It isn't a bad
Yeah.
thing, right?
Right.
This is part of the way we grow as human beings.
Because we're
Like
here to
if
learn.
if we were supposed to stay in heaven, we would have stayed in heaven, right? Instead, we chose to come down into this world of duality and have this experience and create this identity for a reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's part of the experience. Like, it's okay. It's part of the learning
Yeah.
experience of this earth, and the sensations and all the emotions and all the things. We're trying to learn how to use them for our best good, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
We're blessed with all these emotions to decipher and decode what's going on around us, to write our story.
Yep. To write our story. It's the beginning of our earth existence. And it's perfect. It's
Mm.
the most perfect setup for exactly what we came to learn and experience and to support. It's almost like the fuel for the rocket ship.
Yeah.
This is the
Yeah.
beginning steps of the fuel for the rocket ship, right?
Mm.
And
I
that
love that.
fuel has to burn in order to get that rocket ship into
Yeah.
the air, right? But first, you
Right.
got to create the fuel. So, creating the fuel for this scenario is these belief systems that we start making up and buying into and believing, depending on what our circumstances were growing up, right? About
Mm.
ourselves, and we start to create this fuel and this fuel and this fuel and this fuel.
So I wonder if how you can detect what your core story is, or if you have one, I mean, maybe Marinna said she's never seen anybody that didn't have a negative core story. I think I'm, I don't have the experience you do, but that doesn't surprise me. But how can you how do you know that you are operating off of core story?
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, that is pretty loaded.
That is.
That might be.
I'm wondering what like the next step is so that we can get there, because that feels like a pretty deep dive. And if you want, I can just start from there and just start talking.
Yeah, just start from where you're at. I kind of was going with, what are the symptoms of, what does it look like in a relationship if somebody's operating off of a core story or whatever. But you can
Let's
just go
there.
Okay.
I'll just keep walking you through, and
Yep.
and we'll get to that one. But that feels like they need a little more information before we get them into the big stuff, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So because we are these beautiful little creatures, amazing, powerful, dynamic creatures, right? And oh gosh, how can I say this? It's like all we want is love, right?
Yeah.
All we want is love. That's who we are. That's where we came from, right? And we come down onto this planet where we can now perceive the lack of love. And mom and dad are human, because so they're not always going to show us the love in the way that we would prefer them to show us the love, right? And everything that we're ever desiring, especially as a child, is some form of love. And even as an adult, as I've broken down, like, why do you want that? Why do you want that? It's typically because we want some aspect of love. Even when people say, well, I really want money. Money broken down is really kind of an act of love. It's like you're seeing money as a way of receiving nourishment of some sorts from life or God or your boss or the work. You know what I'm saying? Like it's kind of a form of love itself. So everything we're all wanting on this planet, or at least most of us, is some form of love. Right? So as little children, that's what we're wanting. That's what we're looking for. And that's what we are beginning to realize or beginning to perceive that we don't always get. And then because we have internalized that something's now wrong with me, right? Therefore, I'm not getting the love that I need to from mom or dad or siblings or whatever life, right? Then something's wrong with me. So now I got to create what I'm calling your survival mechanism in order to get that thing, get that love, to make sure my needs are met, right? So I'll use myself as an example. So I was raised in a fairly abusive family and a very large family, and felt very overlooked, right? There were just too many of us, and the attention we did get was oftentimes negative, right? And so very early on, I learned how to people please in a big way. I learned how to listen. Like some of these are really great skills to learn too. So it's not all shadow that's developed here, right? But I learned how to listen and have my feelers out for like, okay, when's the positive going to come and when's the negative going to come? And I want to make sure that the only thing that comes my direction is as positive as I possibly can get it. So I learned how to cater to my dad and cater to everybody else in the family, right? Like everybody, the whole situation, cater. Because I thought that was going to bring me the love. It didn't. It didn't. And I'm sure you're like, know this too, right?
Well, it maybe brought some attaboys or some feelings of accomplishment, or you wouldn't keep doing it, right?
Exactly. It definitely got me less abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It kept me out of trouble. As for the most part, I was definitely learned how to stay out of trouble. I learned how to read people's actions. I learned a lot, right? And I call all of these our survival, right? I did this for survival. Whatever mechanisms that our watchers are taking on, they did it for survival, to survive their childhood, right? All because they were trying to make sure their needs were met, their love need were met. And yeah, the ego might have been fed. Like I might have had a pat on the back, like, oh, you're such a good girl, keep doing that, kind of a thing. I got those things all the time. And then I'd be given lots more responsibility, which wasn't always fun. You know what I'm saying? But
Mm.
that helped me survive my childhood.
Yeah.
That did
Yeah.
not help me survive my adulthood, right?
Mm.
Like I got through childhood and came into adulthood, and all those mechanisms that I had created started creating disaster in my relationships.
Yeah. What were some of the mechanisms as an adult that you picked up
Same
as
thing.
a child?
People pleasing was probably my
Mm.
biggest number one mechanism that I took on. Now, people can have all kinds of mechanisms, right? They can have mechanisms to keep quiet. They can have mechanisms to talk all the time. They can have mechanisms to be the funny guy, right?
Mhm.
So here's where
Mhm.
our personas play into this, right? So we literally create these personas and they are our mechanisms. And it all is about trying to get the love and attention that we want.
Yeah.
And there are some of us, probably quite a lot of us actually, that once the mechanisms don't start bringing you what you want, there's a lot of give up. Like, well, screw that. Why did I
Yeah.
even try? I'm never going to try again. And so then
Yeah.
the mechanism shifts sometimes into a lack of action.
Yeah.
But typically it starts with action in the beginning. Like,
And
okay, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do to make sure I get the attention and the love and the connection and the whatever that I'm trying to get? And so I'll do whatever and I'll create whatever, right?
so
To survive.
that could show up as a real needy person, or it could show up as mental health issues
Mhm.
at that point, right?
Yep.
Depression, anxiety.
Yep. Depression, anxiety, it could show up as emotional
Mm.
challenges, right? Like in my family, emotions weren't accepted, not even joy. Too much joy, right? Like you just shouldn't be feeling too much, right? And so there was
Wow.
this big learning around stuff it all in, stuff it all in, stuff it all in, right? And then so many of us are empathic beings where we feel everything and all of that, right? And so then the more we're stuffing and trying to get it to go away, the more we're kinking our hose and that energy cannot flow, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
for me, what it was like, okay, I stuffed everything in and then I people pleased and I would stuff it even bigger and I'd people please and I'd stuff
Mm.
it even bigger, right? Until by the time I think I was probably about 22, I was married. I had a couple of kids by now. And I was so shut down and so backwards and so shy that I would have my husband pay for things at the check stand because I didn't know that that person behind the counter wasn't going to judge me or need something from me, that I wasn't going to be able to do it right or perfect, right?
Um,
And I wouldn't talk on the phone. Like I was really shut down, really backward, really shy, right? I'm
mhm.
not a shy
Mhm.
person. I didn't know this. I'm not a
Wow.
shy person. I'm a very friendly, loving, outgoing kind
Yeah.
of a person. But I didn't know this because I had created so much of that fuel, right? Like so many of those stories stacked one on top of the other over and over and over and over again until I was just this really shut down individual.
Yeah.
So of course, my relationships are not going to thrive in an environment where I can't be authentic, where I don't even know what's authentic. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like when
Mhm.
when we're little kids, if a little child is allowed to just run and play and experiment, and they have this personality, right? But I was never really. I mean, yeah, I ran around and played, but I was never really allowed to be my authentic self. And so looking back, I'm like, I didn't even know who I was, not even as a child. I would look at pictures
Yeah.
even, and I was sad for as long as I can remember,
Uh,
And I think so many of us are.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
You weren't the kind of kid that was allowed to run around naked. Express yourself,
Unlike
you
some of
know.
my grandkids. I've got a granddaughter who the first chance she gets, her clothes are off.
Yeah. And then sometimes, I feel what that kid, I think, wow, that's a great idea. I mean, but yeah. So self-expression and admitting that you have emotions was not really the normal.
No, And
Yeah.
because I was squelching my emotions and because I was people pleasing and because I was trying so dang hard to be perfect, what kind of a relationship could I have actually had with my husband? I mean, really, right? Like, and so like he would talk and he would say things and I was just like, yep, yep. But really great thing is I've got some fire in me too, right? Like I got some spunk in me. And so I didn't believe it. And I knew I wasn't believing it. Even though there were lots of times that I'd be like, yep, I agree. I agree. Inside, I knew I didn't believe it. I knew I wanted something different. So luckily, thank God, that aspect of me was there because that's really fueled my
Yeah.
unwinding of some of these core patterns.
And really getting to the bottom. And maybe your husband didn't even understand that you wanted something different, or that you had some beliefs of your own,
How
right?
could he? How
Did
could
you
he? I
sell?
never told him.
Yeah. And is it called selling out if you just keep quiet, just to keep the
Yeah.
peace, or to be the peacemaker or
Yep.
whatever?
Yep. But then
Wow.
when I started coming out of this and started expressing my mind, that wasn't taken very well either. So then it was
Yeah.
like, yeah, this is the exact reason that I kept my mouth shut in the first place, is because I was trying to avoid the fight, avoid problems, avoid all this stuff so that I could get love. But it
Yeah.
wasn't love I got. It was some massively watered down version of love because I couldn't receive it. He might have been trying to give me all the love in the world, but I never would have seen it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, I never would have seen it because I was so for for many reasons I couldn't see it, but because I couldn't love myself, I wasn't authentic, I didn't even know who I was, I wasn't able to receive love either.
If you can't generate love, you can't receive it, right? Would that be true to say that? If you can't generate your own love, if you don't love yourself, can you still receive love from others?
I would say limited. It's
Yeah.
very
Okay.
limited, the amount of love. Like, yes, to some degree you can, because at a soul level you can never not be love, right? You can
Yeah.
never not be love. It's just that there's
Yeah.
so many layers and layers and layers that I've added onto me that it's a little harder to get that love all the way through all those layers, all those barriers and armor that I have up, right?
That had to do with your core story. I mean, in the very bottom of all of that was your core story
Yes.
that
So the
was
core
that was
story that
centered.
that I made up, or I believed, even if I didn't make it up, I believed it, right?
Yeah.
Was that there's just something innately wrong with me. Just something innately wrong with me. And many people's core stories have that flavor of something's wrong, or something's missing in me, or I'm just not good enough, right? Or I'm just not worthy of the love, right? Which to me, I think you could even push it a little further and go, well, why aren't you worthy? Well, because there's something wrong with me, right?
Yeah.
To me
Yeah.
personally, I think it always boils down to the fact that there's something wrong with me, that's what I'm believing. But I haven't been able to prove that yet. So,
Interesting.
I don't push it. I let people have their own journeys and I let people discover their own way, right? It's so
Yeah.
important for people to have their own verbiage for this. And if
Mhm.
those words don't align with you, then choose the words that do, you know?
Right.
Yeah. But so a lot of people's, like, I grew up in a family with all kinds of other personalities, right? Just as we often all do. Um, and some of those personalities did their core story way different than me, right? Like
Yeah.
it still might have had its core in I'm not good enough, or there's something wrong with me. But then that might have lit a different mechanism in them, like a survival mechanism, like, oh, I gotta fight if I want my needs met. Right.
Mhm.
And so I had a sister who was like a year and a half older than me. And her and I, we got along, but boy, did she embarrass me a lot. A ton, because she was always like, well, they think I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm just going to go make sure my needs are met. And I don't care what trouble I get into. And I was over here trying to save the peace. Right. And so we all might do our mechanisms way
Yeah.
different. We all have
Even
our
though you're in the
own flavor.
same you were in the same environment, but you all just took your own take on it. You have
Hmm.
your own individual psyche and your own you know, you're writing a different story. Everybody is, it seems like, even though you are in the same environment.
And we have different gifts,
Yeah.
right? We have different gifts. We come with a different person. I don't know if personality is the right word for it, but we
Yeah.
come different from each other. We all have our own unique spark of,
Yeah.
I don't know, qualities, right? And so as a result of that, I think our fuel is built. Our fuel with these core stories, that kind of fuel, is actually built in such great alignment for our gifts, so that when we're ready to work through that core story, those belief systems, and we can start to see the truth of our being, then we can go boom and skyrocket up.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's almost like the core story is being willing to dig deep enough to acknowledge the core story that's there. Is
Yes,
that kind of
yes,
okay?
yes, yes, yes. And that, I won't lie to people, that takes some honesty with yourself and serious willingness to face your deepest, darkest. It's the core for a reason. It's in the most darkest regions of your entire psyche. Like, you know what I mean? So when I'm
Yeah.
inviting people to go here, I'm like, I don't push them to go to the very, 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 very core. I want to only encourage them to go as deep as they can right now. Right.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, because what we can still discover the mechanisms, we can still interrupt those mechanisms, we can still do the liberation formula, we can totally liberate ourselves without having to go that's, I didn't say it right, without having to discover the absolute core in this moment.
Right. Right.
Eventually what's going to happen as people start exploring this, they're going to get safer and safer to start looking at those darker and darker places. And when
Yeah.
you do, then it's like you've built some muscle, and it's a lot easier to be able to go to those dark places.
Absolutely. I kind of feel like it's a sense of everybody has their own timing
Hmm.
and their own yeah, it is a sacred walk, and you don't want to push and prod too much. um I feel like it's quite a bit like a physical labor, in the sense that if your doctor or midwife was pushing you to hurry, hurry, hurry on for their timing, it's really tough. And I
Yeah.
feel like the emotional discovery is, and the core story discovery is similar to that. Like
Hmm.
it and you can learn enough about it to be curious. If you stay curious, I think that you'll get to the bottom of it,
Yes,
right?
I love that, Janet. Thank you for saying that. Like, the curiosity is key. Curiosity is key, because when you get down into these deep, dark places within your own psyche, it can feel like you're about ready to look at some monsters. That's what it feels like. That's not really the truth, but that's what it feels like, right? And there's a reason that we haven't faced it yet, and that's because it comes with some big emotion, right? There's some big emotion that surrounds, um, I'm not good enough, or big emotion around there's just something wrong with me, right? There's big emotion around this. And so we tend to run from big emotions as human beings, right? Because we're scared of them when we perceive them as monsters. So then when we start to actually look at this, it can feel like a monster.
Right.
So curiosity is powerful key. It's like, ooh, is this a monster? Right? That would be the first
Yeah.
curiosity. Is it really what I think it is? Could it be something different? What does this monster look like if it really is a monster, right? Maybe it's a friendly monster. I
Yeah.
don't know, right? Like, I love curiosity.
Yeah.
Curiosity has blessed me so much. So I really appreciate you bringing that up.
You know, yeah, I watch people, and if they're getting tripped up in their relationships with either outbursts of anger or jealousy, or any statements that are the lack of limiting statements, like I'll never have enough money to go on fancy trips like everybody else does, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't have enough money to get a massage, or whatever your limiting beliefs are. I feel like that is an indicator that you get to go deeper and find that core story, and really look at it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that you have so many great things in your relationships.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. Like relationships are a ripe experience of pulling your limiting stories to the surface. And that is such a gift so that we can look at it, right? Like, oh, my husband should do this and this and this for me. That's a limiting story, right? Or, oh, my relationship sucks, right? That's a limiting story. Or there's just not much I can do about it. That's just the way we are. you know
Yeah.
or kids are such a burden, or how about this one? Men are just like children. I feel like I have to raise my husband, right?
Oh,
We hear that
yeah.
so much,
Yeah.
right?
So
or
true.
or women are just weaker, or like so many things that we have that we're believing that we bring into our most precious. I guarantee you did not marry the person that you married because you saw them as a jerk.
Yeah.
You married them
Yeah.
because you
That's
saw
right.
aspects in them that you loved, that you're like, "Ooh, I love being around this person." And then all of a sudden they turn into a jerk. How does that happen?
Right.
Well, I'll
Right.
tell you, your limiting beliefs.
Right.
Your limiting beliefs, the other person's limiting beliefs, and then the beliefs are having a relationship. It's not even the two authentic people having a relationship anymore.
It's the two insecurities or the two core stories
Yes,
that are
and the
interacting.
mechanisms, right? The
Yeah.
mechanisms are
Definitely.
having a relationship with each other because both parties are trying to either get love or keep love,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And anytime we do anything to try to get love, we are coming from our core story. So that's a really great way to discover when you're doing it is take a look
Oh,
at why are you doing the action you're doing.
yeah.
If you are taking an action, I don't care what action it is, if you are taking an action to try to get some form of love, you are in mechanism, in a survival mechanism. And what I'm discovering is that if you're doing the action from mechanism instead of your authentic being, it's going
Mhm.
to end in self-sabotage.
Wow. Yeah.
Okay. So I was working with this very successful gentleman, really
Mhm.
beautiful, amazing soul. He's actually done a bunch of work, you know what I'm saying, inner work. And yet his mechanism was all about push, 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 go, 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 make everything happen so I can be wealthy. And one of his
Yeah.
challenges, this is where his self-sabotage, he's made money. That's great.
Yeah.
But his sabotage is coming in his relationship.
Oh.
So you may be successful in one area, right? Because of your mechanism, but you're not going to be able to have the holistic picture because you're actually coming from a lie. You're not coming from the truth of your being. You're coming from a lie that you've believed about yourself and then added all these other things onto it.
So it may look, am I understanding you, Marina? It may look positive when you're dealing with your mechanisms. It may look like a good thing. Like I have a daughter that one of her mechanisms is to work harder. And
Yeah,
she's a hard worker and
yeah,
her bank account reflects that.
yeah, yep,
But is it her authentic self wanting to work those hours, or is that core story
yeah.
driving her?
Only she knows because only she can look within herself and go, why am I working so flippin' hard?
Yeah.
What am I trying to get? Right. And if she's working hard because she loves to work hard and it fulfills her to work hard, it's probably essence. But if she's working hard so that she doesn't have to be poor, so that she can have money, chances are it's coming from a mechanism.
Wow. So true. So
Same
true.
thing with people pleasing. If you're people pleasing to try to save the peace so you can get love, you're absolutely in mechanism. You're going to self sabotage. You're never going to get the love that you really deeply want. And when you do get love, it's not satisfying because it's yeah, you can't receive it, right? And
Hmm.
it's because it's coming from the same place. Now, on the opposite end, if you're loving because you just freaking love to love, right? If you're giving because you freaking just love to give and for
Yeah.
no other reason, not to get their love, not to get their acceptance, not to get an ego boost in yourself, not to feel like I'm special and I'm a righteous person now because I'm giving, you know what I'm saying? All those
Yeah.
things are mechanism. It's got to be a completely free, open, I'm doing this for the sheer pleasure of doing it. Right. And
That's,
so, like, when
yeah.
you look at the planet, how many of us are actually living that way? from this place of I'm doing whatever I'm doing for the sheer pleasure of doing it. I'm sure there are probably lots of us doing that.
Yeah.
And there's probably times that even people who come from their mechanism most all the time will still have action come from essence. It's not that all our action isn't or is coming from mechanism, right? It's just
Right.
a lot of our action, until we can unwind these limiting beliefs, a lot of our actions are going to come from mechanism.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's not like we're always doing something that we totally just love, because I wouldn't be making this video, because it is very uncomfortable for me to make a video. But my thing that I do love is for people to understand the things that could make their relationships better.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what you love, right? And so
And
then
that,
you stretch yourself and you're willing to
yeah,
actually come out of your comfort zone and learn a few new
yeah,
things, be vulnerable. Yeah.
right. So that feeling of this is the key that could help other people in relationships, like it's helped me, is what I'm looking for. And it's like there's some other things that I do, like make videos and different things that is very uncomfortable, but I feel the response, and I see people catching on to it and going, oh my gosh, why didn't I know this a long time ago?
Yeah. And that vulnerability and discomfort it'll ease up over time, and it'll probably end up being fun for you.
Well, and I'm kind of exaggerating, because you and I have made a couple videos together, and I think that, yeah, I'm always quite nervous up front, but it really isn't that torturous, to hang out and listen to you. I actually learn on deeper levels by listening to you, and so it's kind of like my own private chit chat with you. So I like
Nice.
that.
Nice. I love it. Yeah, I remember where I came from was the back um closed off, shut down. I wouldn't even talk on the phone, right? And now here I am making videos and I'm teaching and whatever, right? So how did I get from there to here,
Yeah.
right? And so yeah, like this is just temporary. That was scary to start teaching, but I was
I'll bet.
ready for it, By that point, I was ready for it. I was already looking at my stuff. I was already, that kind of thing. And then I started teaching, which was like, who am I really teaching? This
Yeah.
person, right?
Yeah.
And I learned
Absolutely.
so freaking much during those years that I was teaching every single week, every single week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've noticed, and I'm teaching a class, but I've noticed that if I try to point out my husband's core story or my friend's core story, it's really not, it just doesn't work. It's not
it,
productive.
it doesn't.
I don't get the results that I would like.
Yeah.
So we can't fix each other or heal each other, but we get to heal ourselves and acknowledge and notice our core story.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, that's one pretty disastrous thing for your relationship is if you start to try to be your husband or wife's coach
Not good.
or your partner, right? Like, or, and parents do this a lot with children too. It's like when you try to step into that role and start being their coach, and children accept it a lot more than spouses or partners,
Yeah.
but still it can be very damaging to try to think you know better than another person, right?
Yeah.
We don't.
You don't. You're
We
the
don't.
authority on your core story,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
And you're the authority on yours. And it's the same thing in a relationship. Yeah.
Right.
Let your partner deal with their own crap. That's not your
Yeah.
job. Not your job. But people in relationships have such a hard time seeing that. Like that, I get this a lot. They'll be like, yeah, but it would be so much easier if they would just do their work too, right? Or if they would just do it in this way, it would be easier. I'm like, yeah, it probably would, but that's still none of your business and none of your responsibility. And by
And
stepping in, you're creating more problems.
are you coming from core to
Yes.
want to fix him and judge him, and like, is that something you really
Yes.
need to deal with,
Yes, 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 yes. So totally. Like most of the time when we go to try to fix another person, we're actually in our core belief about ourselves, and that's why we're judging them. Right?
We're trying to hero them.
We're trying to hero them, we're trying to judge them, we're trying to fix them, we're trying to whatever. because they're reflecting something about us that's triggering our core story.
So we want to turn that reflection away instead of look within and go, wow, what is
Yep.
that telling me about me?
Yep.
If that triggers me.
Exactly.
And so in society, yeah, we avoid triggers. And if we would look at triggers and welcome triggers and get curious with triggers, we would tap into our core story and go, oh, okay,
Yep,
yeah,
exactly. This is what's really going on. I'm
yeah,
wanting my husband to change because I'm judging him because I don't let myself do the same thing
yeah,
or something, whatever it is, right? And
something,
then we
yeah,
go, wow, look at that. Like, it's so amazing when we can start looking this direction at what's going on underneath the surface. It's amazing to discover what's there. All the
yeah.
reasons you're doing what you're doing.
It's
And
weird, isn't it?
can be a little it can be a little challenging at first. It
Yeah,
bruises the ego pretty fast, can humble you pretty big, right? And
yeah,
this is where your liberation lies, is that ability and willingness and commitment to look no matter what.
right. And to stick with it, not
To stick
slam the
with it.
door real quick and run
You're
as
like,
fast as you can.
oh, it really is a monster.
Boom.
Slam. And take off the other way. Because
Oh,
at
yeah,
first glance, it's going to look like a monster.
yeah,
Over time, though, as you sit with it, and this we'll get into the more of this with the liberation formula video, as you sit with it and you talking with it and you're connecting with it, it starts to not it starts to cease to be a monster in your perception. And
absolutely.
then you start to see that what's really going on underneath the surface is a hurt little girl or boy that just wants your love and attention. That's it.
Right.
It's the only thing that's there.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good note to, yeah, that's awesome. Um, I'm really excited because I've talked to a friend and I've got such good friends that are willing to do some crazy things with me, but I've talked a friend into doing a video with you and I for where you can walk her through the story and I get to watch this and just kind of see, the process in that part of it. I mean, I've walked through the story. You've helped me walk through my core story and get to know it, be familiar with my core story. And so I'm excited about that. And then we'll make the video on liberation,
The
right?
liberation formula. It's like, okay, now once you find your core story, what the heck do you do with that? Right? I
Yeah.
liken it to being in prison. Like the core story, discovering your core story is like discovering that you're in prison and you weren't aware of the fact that you were in prison. You knew something was off, you knew something was wrong. Maybe you even did know you were in prison, right? But to really look at it, you go, oh crap, I'm in prison and I put me here, right? But
Hmm.
it's not so easy. Well, let me say it differently. It can be easy. It's not a matter of just going, oh, well, since I put me here, I'm going to unlock the door and walk out of it. Right? Because we
Yeah.
have so many imprints and patterns and everything's like kind of wired and mixed together, kind of like shoelaces. Like if you had a big ball of shoelaces or yarn that's all like, or
Yeah.
cords, you know
Right.
how tangled they all get. That's kind of what our life is like when we go, okay, so now I know, yep, I'm in prison and I got to untangle all of these things to get them to unwind. And that's what the liberation formula is. However, when I was studying Byron Katie's work, like her work does that, right? She does help you to unwind all of your strings, right? So that you can start letting them go and liberate yourself. What I discovered though is when I was doing her work, I felt like I was going to be doing that forever. And so then I was started getting curious, and I think this is where the inspiration came from. Is I started getting curious, like there's got to be an easier way. There's got to be an easier way. What's an easier way to get the? I'm going to be working through stories my whole damn life, right?
Yeah.
Even though
Yeah.
I had some tastes of freedom, I didn't have that ultimate taste of freedom. I was still in prison, even after years of doing her work. But I was happier. I was a lot happier and a lot more free.
Yeah.
So then I asked this question, like, well, what's the easier way? And that's when this piece came through of like, it was like I was shown all the stories, almost like a funnel. right? And all these stories were like surface stories. Or we could even use like a plant, even though I didn't see it this
Yeah.
way, I've used this analogy. It's kind of like a plant, and all of our stories are the leaves, right? All our surface
Right.
stories are the leaves and the stem, right? And then the flower is the result of our life, right? Of the result
Yeah.
of our belief systems is our life. And but what's underneath that? You can rip the top off that plant over and over and over again, and the plant's going to keep growing because it has a root.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what I saw, was that there is a root belief that we all have, that is literally all the other belief systems are coming from. And if we can pull that root out, we can liberate ourselves rather quickly.
Right. Right. And is it a matter of exposing that root to the sunshine and
Big part of
it
it.
kind of withers up?
Yep. A big part of it is to pull that root up and look at it and sit with it and be with it and be aware of all its little nuances, right? Like, and we'll get into this more in the other video, but it's like really being aware of that. I lost my train of thought. But yeah,
But
that's
just an
going to help
awareness.
to pull the root. Awareness is the first step, the first key. Getting curious about it, looking at it, being willing to face it instead of running, because the root is definitely surrounded by a crap load of your deepest emotions that you really do not want to look at.
Yeah.
It's the one you've been running from your entire life. And so it's no wonder it stays hidden in the ground,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? It's no wonder
It,
you keep it hidden in that really dark corner clear off over there in my back.
yeah.
Because I don't want to look at it, because it's pain. It can be painful. But
Yes.
what I've also
Yeah.
discovered is so painful is our resistance to it that's actually painful.
Right.
Right? A
Without.
resistance to it that creates so much of this, like, oh, I can't go there, right? But if we'll be willing to look at it and look at it and look at it, it gets to where it's like, oh yeah, there you are. I see you. I see you. And yeah, that hurts, but it's not overwhelming pain.
Right. You can breathe through it.
You can breathe through it. Yeah.
Yeah. So true. Awesome. I'm excited to do that other video then with the process, to
Yes.
actually see the process.
Yes. Yes. That will be good.
Awesome. I think that tells people pretty much, if you're trying to get some form of love, whether it's, or, some sort of acceptance or kudos or whatever it is, trying actually kind of is an indicator that you have a core story that you're not aware of. If you have any of the mechanisms,
Yep.
then
If you're doing it to get something, you're in mechanism. And if you're
okay,
in mechanism, you're literally coming from a core story or a core lie about who you are as a
okay,
being, right? And
right.
because of that core lie, then your actions are inauthentic. It's coming
And
from
it
a
just
lie.
will,
How can it be authentic, right?
so it just generates more of that lie.
It does. It generates more of that lie,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah, so powerful because we all want to generate love and great things in our world and not have to get it from outside source,
Mm-hmm.
but yet to just
Yeah.
have it there.
Yeah. For so much of my life, like I was learning some of this stuff. Hadn't learned about core story stuff, but I had learned about a lot of stuff, facing emotions, dealing with my stories. I'd been doing all of this, and I thought, yeah, I'm great at this. I'm doing awesome. You know what I mean? My life was getting better. I was having more positive results. But there was one area in my life that I was really sucking at. And that was in business, right? I would have all these brilliant ideas, and I would follow him through, and I would create and I'd create and I'd create. And then inevitably every single one of those crashed and burned.
Oh,
And and then finally I'm like, screw it, I'm done, I'm not doing this anymore. And I stopped coaching, I stopped teaching, I stopped everything, and kind of just went in my own little hidey hole for a while, right?
yeah,
And that's when my spirit guide, my guide, he started
yeah.
teaching me. And it was like all of a sudden I finally got willing and ready to see the deep stuff. Like, why is this not working for me? I work harder than most people I know. I try harder. And part of that was like, I dive deeper into emotion than almost anybody I know. I work harder at doing all this story work than anybody I know. I'm so flipping committed. Why isn't this working? Right? In my relationships, I had a lot of success in my relationships, but in business, I didn't. And
Wow.
and then after being taught all of this for a good handful of years, I could see why. And it was like, oh, because I'm coming from mechanism, it can't work. I'm coming from a lie, it can't work, right? I'm in mechanism, it's not the truth. So then I stopped. I was able to stop, right? Like, and part of that was, oh, there was so much. I don't want to go into that. There was a lot of things that helped me to stop doing that specific mechanism, right? And to start seeing the truth and seeing where I can come from essence and seeing what my essence even is, right? And then I felt like, okay, you get to start teaching again. And at first I was resistant. I'm like, I don't want to teach again, right? Yet I kept feeling inspired to teach, and people kept coming to me for information. And so I started to talk and I started to teach again. Finally, I was like, okay, whatever's wanting to come through me, I'll let it come through me. And it started to happen. And I'll tell you, it's a night and day difference. The business that I'm in the process of running right now, complete different business than I've ever created, in a different way. It's the same actions. Really, I'm coaching, I'm teaching, I'm creating my website. Like, I'm still doing all the same stuff. It's just that I'm not trying. I'm not trying at all. Like,
Flowing.
I'm
Easy
actually
flow.
trying to keep up. I'm trying to keep up because the business is starting to blossom faster than I have the stability for. Or that's my story, right? Is that it's
Right.
faster. It's probably happening the most perfect way. But it's like,
Right.
I've never created a business that I didn't have to try at. And this one has just been like, holy cow, people are flocking to me. People want this. I'm getting phone calls constantly all day long. And it's just like, boom, 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 like that, right? Massive difference. And it's because I'm not coming from my mechanism and that lie. I'm coming from essence, right?
Oh, I
So
love it.
when people can start coming from their essence in their relationships, in their work, in their interactions with each other, with life, right? With their money, with all kinds of stuff, magic starts happening. It becomes so easy, so easy.
Oh man, I'm loving it. And I stumbled upon you in perfect time because you are just like lit up with it. And I've seen you fall back into your mechanisms and your core story, and you will honestly say, I just tripped up and I've been in my mechanisms or in my story. And
Yep.
I love it. Carry
Yep.
on. It's like,
Yep.
hey, this is what happened and now I'm carrying on.
I
And that is
love that you
so
bring that up,
wonderful.
Janet, because I sure as heck don't want to portray the image that I'm all perfect and got all my shit together, right? Like, I'm still learning right along with everybody. And again, I'm teaching. So who am I teaching the most?
Right. So true.
Right?
And that makes you a good teacher because you don't care to be put on a pedestal, and you don't care to be like the hero.
Right.
You don't feel like that's what you're doing, and that makes you the best teacher for me because I can see that you're not perfect. And so I'm not, going, oh, I just want to be like this. I want to feel alive like I see you do. And I'm feeling it. Like
Yeah.
it's catching on. And that is exactly when you're sitting there talking about how things are just opening up. That is just how I feel because we're doing things that we know we love and want to do.
Yeah.
And we know it's where our desire, it's where our heart is.
Yeah. It's where our heart is. It's where our purpose is. It's where our gift is. It's the
Yeah.
whole reason we came here.
Yeah.
Right? And we're trying to do it in mechanism and it doesn't work. And so it's unfulfilling. But when we can get into essence and we might even do the same action, that's when it starts getting fulfilling. That's when it starts to feel passionate and alive and fun and exciting.
So truthfully, when you go through the core story and you discover some aspects about yourself, keep in your mind that those are little bits and pieces of yourself, and yourself is amazing. Like there's no limit to what you can create and do. Like
Yeah.
we, it's just a little bit of the truth. You know what I'm saying? Like
I do.
it's what's holding you back from just being so alive with what
Being
you
all of
really,
yourself.
yes. Yeah,
Yes. So this kind of, if you're okay with me diving deeper into this realm, right?
sure.
Like the reason that the core story is a lie isn't because you can be isn't because you're not a jerk sometimes, right?
Right.
It's because it's not the whole picture.
Right. Yes.
It's not the whole picture. So it's like it's a lie because it's only one little teeny tiny piece of the picture. One little
Yeah.
teeny tiny piece of the picture might be I'm not good enough. Yeah, that's one aspect of you. But you're also way more than good enough. And you're also everything in between. And you're also all these other things, right? And
Yeah.
so if we grasp a hold of one little thing and go, this is me, this is me, this is the extent of who I am, that's a lie.
Hey, even if we do that to other people, that's a lie.
That's a lie.
If we hold somebody in a little tiny space and say this is it, that's all they can do or all they're good, that is a lie.
That's a
Because
lie.
we're not looking at that whole human as a whole,
Yeah.
right?
Like, do we really ever look at another human being and see the truth of their being?
No, no,
Probably not until we see the truth of our being.
right. It's limitless.
It's from what I'm being shown, and I feel like I've been shown just the tip of it, right? I've been asking questions like what is the truth of me? Like I asked that one for a while. What's the truth of me, right? Like so okay, so I'm getting down here into the muck and I know this isn't the truth of me. So I want to see the truth of me, right? And then
Yeah.
I had a thought come in, well, what if the truth of you doesn't fit your picture? And I'm like, oh, had never thought of that. Okay, because the truth of me at that point was this really magnificent being. So then I was like, okay, you know what? I don't really care. I want the truth. I want the truth. Even if it's the ugliest thing, I've already sat with the monster, right?
Right.
I've already sat
Yeah.
with the monster as if it's all true about me. That's the worst possible thing I could make up about myself. So it's like I've already sat there. So could the truth be worse than that? I don't think so, right?
No.
So I'm like, okay, show me the truth. Show me the
Yeah.
truth. I want the truth of me, the truth of my being, not anybody's opinions, nobody's ideas, not even my own. I want the
Yeah.
truth of me. And I had an experience shortly after, like maybe a week or two after asking those questions. And it was in the middle of the night. I'd gotten up to pee and come back to bed. And I started feeling this thing in my brain. And it was right here. And it was a little bit painful, but it wasn't horrible. And all of a sudden I felt it go boom and kind of release. And I started having a whole experience of the truth of me. And that was, like, you know how you have experiences sometimes, but you know it's not the whole experience?
Yeah.
I feel like I was just seeing the tip of the truth of me. And the tip of the truth of me was way more magnificent. It was everything, it was nothing. It was the most magnanimous thing and the most selfish and the most nothing, like dark, evil, and the most grandiose. It was like, and I just a little bit, and I was just like, holy cow, holy cow, holy cow. This is changing all my paradigms. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I can really connect with you because when I learned the core story and then did the liberation formula and worked with myself with that core story, I felt such a love from God that I've never felt in my whole that I can remember of.
Yeah.
Like I felt so loved. It was, I don't think that God's love changed for me, but I think that I took my blinders off and I was just like, wow, I am
You
so
could
cared
receive it
for.
bigger.
Yeah,
Some of your
yeah,
armor was gone, and so you could
yeah,
receive it.
yeah. So I'm so getting you. I'm so understanding where you're coming from. I feel like that's
Yeah.
awesome.
There's so much out there for us to receive. So
Yeah,
many goodies on this planet. So many goodies in our relationships that we can receive when we're able to let this go, when we're
yeah.
able to liberate ourselves.
So cool. Yep.
Yeah. So worth it. So worth it.
Anyway, I'm so happy that we made this video and had these conversations because it always is better than what I even pictured. you know?
Yeah.
I'm always learning on a new level and understanding on a new level. And I'm excited to make this next one that actually shows people, it'll actually show us working through that.
Yeah.
So
I think it'll be good.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. And thank you to our watchers and all the people who joined us today and in learning and diving deeper into themselves. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being interested in something greater. So thanks for coming. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, sounds good.